one focused on stamping, related subassembly and other miscellaneous activities for GM and other auto industry customers. This new business will retain 300 Oshawa jobs with the intent to grow and generate significant additional jobs in the coming years as the business attracts new customers. Additionally, GM will convert 55 acres at the south end of the Oshawa plant into a test track for autonomous and advanced vehicle testing. Now, this is very significant as it will not only support jobs, it will continue to grow our engineering and software development workforce based just across the road at the Oshawa Technical Centre and our new Markham Technical Centre. You can see some references to the test track in the images beside here. Relative to the transition plans for our employees, at the core of our discussions, we have been establishing a transition plan for all of our 2,600 hourly employees at Oshawa. In addition to the growth plans for the new parts manufacturing business, GM will also offer special relocation opportunities for Oshawa employees into other Ontario operations. Now, as we've noted over the past months, about 50% of our hourly employees will be eligible for their GM retirement pension later this year, and we will offer enhanced retirement packages to approximately 1,300 of these employees. These include vouchers towards purchase of a new GM vehicle, and Unifor will be meeting with its members to discuss specific details in meetings later tomorrow. We also recognise that many Oshawa Assembly employees will be focused on pursuing new career opportunities in 2020. Fortunately, we have strong hiring demand from over 40 employers from around the Greater Toronto area. This is a very unique opportunity to support the career transition planning more than 6 months ahead of the end of production. So we will establish a new job action centre at the Oshawa plant in partnership with Unifor, the Ontario government, our local colleges and universities. We will provide millions of dollars in financial support focused on retraining our employees and helping them secure solid new career opportunities. I want to thank our governments, Durham College, Centennial College and Trent University of Durham for their strong involvement and support as we put that plan together. And finally, relative to the Oshawa community, the Oshawa community's been through a lot in these past few months, and yet they've been incredibly supportive. I would like to give special thanks to Oshawa Mayor Dan Carter and Durham Regional Chair John Henry for their support. I think we have some representatives from them here today, although Dan Carter couldn't make it himself. I think he'll be available later today for comments. So I want to send a strong and positive message from GM to the people of Oshawa. With our Canadian headquarters, our sales and marketing organisation, the OnStar Support Centre, the Oshawa Engineering Centre and the new announcements that I've made just here mentioned, GM plans to be one of Oshawa's leading companies and employers for many decades to come. Accordingly, I'm also very pleased to announce GM intends to donate the 3-acre Fenland Park and the 87-acre McLaughlin Bay Waterfront Wildlife Preserve to the city for the permanent benefit and enjoyment of Oshawa citizens. And again, we have some photographs across here of that park. So we expect to make some further announcements on that beautiful parkland later today. And however, I'm pleased to make the announcements today.
And forgive us, we're obviously having some audio issues from source, but you are looking right now. Oh, here we go. Let's listen now to Jerry Diaz, who is with Unifor. He's the Unifor president as they announce a new deal between workers in Oshawa, Ontario, as well as GM Canada. Again, we apologize for the audio issue, but it was at source, and we're now going to listen to the Unifor president.
Jerry, back. 10, 9, yeah, we're good. All right, thank you, Travis. Look, today's discussion is about the transformation of the of the Oshawa facilities, and that's what Travis laid out. But before I speak more of it, I have to tell you that I'm preoccupied about our history in Oshawa and about the current situation we're facing in Oshawa. Because it wasn't so long ago we had over 21,000 jobs in Oshawa. And Oshawa is deeply personal for me. It's personal to our organization. So when one of our members loses a job, it's a big deal to us, and it's a concern. I say it's deeply personal for a variety of reasons. My niece, Juliette, works in GM in Oshawa. My nephew, Christopher, works in GM in Oshawa. My father lives in Oshawa. His neighbors are GM retirees. My mother is buried in Oshawa. I'll see you Sunday. But I'm deeply concerned about all of this. And I'm concerned, of course, about the negative impact that it's going to have. But we knew right from the beginning that this wasn't going to be easy, that we are going to be in an uphill battle. And there was going to be some strong discussions with General Motors. And I have to say, and I'll say it candidly, very few people thought that Travis and I would be here today. So our preoccupation right from the beginning, after the announcement in November, was we needed to keep the footprint in Oshawa. We obviously wanted another vehicle for Oshawa. But look, timing isn't working for us today. And I realize, candidly, that a vehicle isn't going to be falling out of the sky from now till December. So the question is, what do we do? And I'm pleased here today to sit with Travis to say, listen, we both understand the importance of maintaining the footprint in Oshawa. The paint shop in Oshawa would probably take about $800 million to duplicate. So the fact that we're going to maintain the integrity of manufacturing for the long term is critically important, because things change in this industry. And I'll take a look at GM, for example, and that's why we've never thrown in the towel. I take a look at the Spring Hill plant in Tennessee. The Spring Hill plant that had 3,700 people in 2009, they eliminated all their manufacturing but kept some parts jobs. Today, they have almost 4,000 jobs, and have announced, I believe, last year that they're putting back to third shift. I take a look at the Orion plant in Michigan that in 2009 was totally idled, completely idled. Came back to life in 2011, and I watched last year GM announcing, last month, about a $300 million investment that'll create another 400 jobs. I look at GM's plant in Fremont, California, that is now ran by Tesla. At the time of the closure in 2010, there was 4,700 jobs lost. Today, there's over 10,000. So when we say that maintaining the integrity is so critically important, that's exactly what we mean, because things change, and I understand that better than anybody. So today's announcement isn't about buying time, and I respect that and I understand that. Today is an incredibly important announcement because it's innovative. It's going to be a first for General Motors. And what does that mean? The $170 million investment will do many things, but one of the key things is we'll be creating a first ever aftermarket facilities for GM vehicles. So let me give you an example. The Traverse, the Acadia, the Equinox, our Equinox. After they finish production for 10 years, you have to provide aftermarket parts. Quarter panels, doors, hoods, trunks, roofs. So what GM is doing here today is they are making a long-term commitment to Oshawa, because with every vehicle that we now start to perform the aftermarket work, it's a 10-year commitment. So what we're doing here today isn't short-term. And look, let me be candid. We have been battling for years maintaining the footprint here in Oshawa. We've built low-volume vehicles. We've done a shuttle from Ingersoll and from Indiana to Oshawa to keep people going. So we've always been deeply concerned, and I can say today that this announcement, though it may not have a lot of jobs as we sit here today in May, there's going to be a heck of a lot more in December. There will be more next year. There'll be more the year after as we continue to attract work. We're meeting with Rob Wildeboer, the CEO of Martin Ria. We've talked to Don Walker from Magna. So we've got a lot of players that are putting their best foot forward. And so I'm content that we have established what I believe to be a business plan for the long term. But look, this doesn't happen without the incredible support that we've gotten from thousands of Canadians, the emails, the people that approach us on the street wishing us good luck. But you know, different things happened during the last 5 months. And I take a look at some of the gifts or some of the people that came forward that you may argue had no skin in the game. I take a look at the rock star Sting that came forward, that reached out to us, who truly has a social conscience and understands the struggles of working class people globally. We've met and spent a lot of time with the cast from The Last Ship. Sophie, Joe, Kevin, I can walk through it, Francis, Peggy, people who understand and are frankly portraying the life of working class people that are in struggle globally. So I want to say to the politicians, watch what's going on here today. Look, I want to thank Justin Trudeau for reaching out on a few occasions to Mary Barra, saying that, listen, we're here, tell us what needs to be done. I'm going to meet with Premier Ford, I'll meet with Doug on Monday, where we're going to continue this conversation. Because people understand that this is an incredibly important industry to Canada, and we need to wake up. The auto industry is an $80 billion a year industry in Canada. It's the #1 export industry. It pays for schools, hospitals, infrastructure. This is a big deal. And listen, I'm going to say this to the politicians. People are watching because this is about Canada. So as I sit here today, don't misunderstand me. Do I believe this is perfect? The answer is no. Am I upset about the thousands of families that have lost all kinds of sleep in the last 5 months? The answer is yes. Am I concerned about the community of Oshawa? The answer is yes. A lot of people have lost a lot of sleep, including me. But what I do know is that to play your cards you're dealt, and you make the best out of a bad situation. And I will suggest that instead of us facing a hard closure in December of this year, we have discussed and secured, and we have an understanding between the parties of a long-term commitment. And that's better, I will argue, than where we're heading. So all I want to say is that to all of you, thank you for your support. Frankly, we aren't going anywhere, and we will be back. And with that, I'll open the floor to questions.
And I'd just like reporters to state your name, and we'll start over here with Global News and Sean O'Shea, and we'll go to the phones shortly. So just go to a mic. I've got 3 of them, and I have a runner. So put up your hand if you need the mic.
Good morning, Mr. Dias. Sean O'Shea with Global News. I'm wondering, sir, if you consider today to be a success or a failure from your point of view. Success in that you were able to save some jobs in Oshawa, or a failure because you were unable to convince General Motors to keep the plant open, something that your union campaigned very strongly on, and many people would agree that you staked your personal reputation on. Success or failure?
Well, first of all, it's a combination of both, and here's why I say this. Did I want a vehicle? Did I want to make sure that we could keep the auto parts plants open? The answer is yes. So from that vantage point, did I succeed or did we succeed? The answer is no. Were we facing an uphill battle right from the beginning? The answer is yes. Have we ran out of time? As I sit here today, the answer is yes. But I do not deem it as a failure. Why? Because GM is going to maintain a long-term footprint in Oshawa, and we've maintained the integrity of the manufacturing facilities. So am I happy today? The answer is no. Am I happier today than I was in November of last year? The answer is yes. But am I deeply concerned about the families that are being negatively impacted? That's my preoccupation today, and it'll be my preoccupation tomorrow. So am I doing backflips? The answer is no. But am I more comfortable that at least we made something out of a bad situation? The answer is yes. And one thing about us, we're not going anywhere.
I have a brief question for Mr. Hester as well. Sir, is all of the money that General Motors is putting into this General Motors money? Is there any component that's government or taxpayer money?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Every single part of this money is General Motors money. There's no government assistance from a financial point of view in this. I would like to say, though, we were in constant communication with both Premier Ford on the Ontario government and also Justin Trudeau and his party for the federal government point of view. We had a very good relationship with them, but this was frankly something that needed to be worked out between General Motors and Unifor. And I think we did that to the best of our ability, and I think the outcome we've got here is really good. But the answer is, yeah, every piece of the money is General Motors money.
I just need to let the operator know, to let the journalists who are joining us from Detroit and Windsor know, to let us know if you have a question, and we're going to go right over here with another question.
Bonjour, ici Christian Noël from Radio-Canada, CBC News. Some of the workers I'm in contact with in Oshawa are saying that it's not bad, but it's also a little bit of wishful thinking.
Sustainable business model that we've got in place. We are our own client. We will be doing stamping operations for the CAMI assembly activity. That's something that we do now, and that will continue into the future. We also have the after-sales activity for a number of products. In fact, there's over 50 component sets that we already have on the books to do this now. But you're right that part of this that is so fundamentally beneficial to the business model we've created, it has tremendous opportunity for growth, significant growth for that business model and jobs into the future. So we're moving along quite well, and we have a lot of things in works.
And one follow-up, if I may, to Mr. Dias. How much of that is about saving face?
Zero. Look, I got broad shoulders, and I don't mind sticking my neck out now and then, because I do know that if you're not prepared to stick your neck out, nothing positive can ever happen. So this is about maintaining the footprint. And let me be candid. Very few people, including many in this room, I will argue, ever expected we'd be here today, yet alone announcing a $170 million investment, talking about any jobs. So this has zero to do with saving face, but I can tell you right now, there's 300 families that are better off today than they would have been in December. And we're talking about the jobs that are in place in the beginning of May. It'll change significantly by December, and will change significantly by the middle of next year and after that. So this is a growing opportunity based on the nature of the business. For every different vehicle we add to the plant as assembly expires, is 10 years of work. So this is a solid business model while maintaining the integrity of the plant. So am I thrilled with where I'm sitting today? No. But do I understand that this is a heck of a start and a solid business model that will create long-term sustainability? The answer is yes. Look, if I take a look at the entire package, and we'll deal with this tomorrow with our members, what we bargained with General Motors is almost $600 million. So we've taken care of people, and we've created opportunities. But where I'm really concerned as I sit here today is the lack of opportunities for our members in the auto parts plants. And I'm also concerned, frankly, about the non-union workers that are going to lose their jobs. There's all kinds of non-union workers that work for Martin Rhea. So this is about a community, but ultimately, you play the cards you're dealt, and we move forward. And that's what I'm trying to do today.
Nick Dixon, CTV News. Mr. Hester, I wonder why it took the union pressure to come up with this plan in the first place. If you're talking about a viable plan, a sustainable business model, why is it that back in November when these decisions were made that the number crunchers and business analysts at GM couldn't see that this was something possible, doable? Why did we have to go through all of this?
I wouldn't say that we needed to go through all this. I would say that when we made the announcement in November, we said that we were going to unallocate the plant, which means that there's no future product beyond the December of 2019 timeframe. That is still consistent today with what we put out and have iterated several times. We've never stopped looking at business models, and we have never stopped looking at opportunities for this site. We've been in constant communication throughout that entire period. I would say that we sat down more specifically, maybe about 6 weeks ago, to get into the details of this concept specifically. But I would say no, we didn't really change the momentum that we were on.
Quick follow-up, Jerry. You thanked Justin Trudeau for reaching out to Mary Barra, but you said you're going to meet with Doug Ford. You had some strong words, very strong words, for Doug Ford a few months ago. What do you say to Doug Ford now?
I'll see you on Monday, Doug. I mean, ultimately, him and I have had many discussions, and frankly, I think if Doug had the opportunity to put the genie back in the bottle, he probably would have. Because when he originally came out and said the ship had sailed, that's clearly not where our head was at. And we were prepared to have the debate with General Motors and publicly. But ultimately, listen, it is what it is. If we're going to have a viable long-term auto industry here in Canada, and specifically in Ontario, then everybody's got to play. The province has to play, the federal government has to play, the employers have to play, we have to play a role. So it's about everybody getting in a room, and I think people are much more conducive to those types of conversations today, because they understand the importance of the auto industry, they understand the bills that they pay, and the jobs that it creates. So I think people have a much better understanding and commitment today than maybe they did in November.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Omar Sachedina from CTV National News. Mr. Dias, I just want to talk to you a little bit about the net job losses. And if I follow the math correctly, there are about 2,600 jobs that were at stake at the Oshawa plant. 300 of those are protected. And so even though the desire, the hope is to get those workers to train or to accept early retirement, as far as the net number is concerned, what is that hard number? Have you been able to come up with any figure?
No, we've got 2,000 members alone just in the auto parts sector, right off the bat. We've got 2,600 members in Oshawa. So what we have now is two things. Number one, you're right. Look, if I just take a look at those job numbers, it's not significant on face value, except if you're one of those 300 families. But B, we know the numbers are going to increase, just based on the business model that's in place and based on our conversations with Martin Ria, with Magna. So I don't dream. I'm quite a realist. So I understand that there will be growth, and I expect there will be significant growth. And clearly, we're talking about this today. We're going to talk about it in negotiations next year. So, look, we're trying to make the best out of this situation. I don't believe a vehicle is falling out of the sky from now till December. So what do we do? And the one thing that I'm comfortable about, that Travis and myself and GM team in Detroit have agreed to, that we're maintaining the integrity of the plant. Because once you maintain the integrity of the plant, you never know what's going to happen. Because we're never going to throw in the towel, and people understand that, and GM understands the importance of the Canadian market. So we're at where we're at today. This is May. We're dealing with Armageddon in December. We're not dealing with that now, but we're still in a situation where there's a lot of conversations to be had. What am I concerned about? The job loss and the impact it has on the families? I've lost a lot of sleep, and will continue to.
And what changed for you? I mean, you were always, still are to a certain extent, a passionate advocate for your union workers. There were rallies that were covered widely. What was the tipping point for you to come to the realization that this is the best deal you're going to get? Because
I understand the industry. And I understand that cars and trucks and SUVs and crossovers don't fall out of the sky that quickly. A year ago, we were pushing and pushing and pushing. But it's all a question of what's on the books, what's on the platforms, what are identified vehicles, what are next vehicles that are coming into production. How do you make those decisions? How long does it take? How much notice do you have to give the supply base to react? So I understand that it's complex. And so I'm now at the point in May where I have to be honest with myself and be honest with our members. Is anything falling out of the sky? Can we rejig the assembly line? Can we modify the assembly line? Can we Do I have the time? And the answer is no. But I also do understand that we're not just buying time. This is a business model that doesn't exist within General Motors. And it's something that's going to sustain jobs for the long term, and I'm comfortable with that. But that piece I'm comfortable with. But listen, I haven't backed off one iota, just so you and I are clear with each other. But I'm a realist. And I understand when it's time to put your best foot forward and build for the future. And for us as Unifor, that's where we believe we're at. But I'm telling you, I'm not leaving here celebrating today, but I'm here understanding that we made the best out of a poor situation.
Hey, Jerry, it's Randy Rapp from CSH TV. Earlier this year, you called for a boycott of General Motors cars manufactured and put together in Mexico. Is this enough to draw you back from that? Is that boycott still on?
Look, okay, look, I got attacked by everybody. I'm okay. I got broad shoulders, like I said. Look, the bigger issue for us isn't just about GM-built vehicles in Mexico. It's about Mexican workers in the auto industry being exploited generally. So whether or not it's General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Mercedes, Toyota, Honda, I can walk right through it. I believe fundamentally that Mexican auto workers should be able to buy the cars that they build. But this was also a part of a much broader discussion that unfolded in the renegotiations of NAFTA, which our union played a role. So I was pleased 2 weeks ago when they passed legislation in Mexico outlining protection agreements, which means that employers can't just sit down with bogus unions, yellow unions, and come up with an agreement that the workers have no say. So we're starting to watch the transformation of the labor laws. And so this is a much broader discussion, and I believe that the boycott that we announced, and I believe that the arguments we made in NAFTA in the profile that we put on that issue has resonated with workers in Mexico. And frankly, there's a much more progressive government in Mexico today that we are talking to about those types of changes. So look, Mexican auto workers, plain and simple, should be able to afford to buy the cars that they build. And nothing's going to push me off that because that's basic, it's fundamental, and it's right.
So the boycott's still on? Yes or
no? No, well, we're going to have a broader discussion at some time or another. Look, I want to sit down with General Motors and find some long-term solutions here. So I don't want to fight with GM as I'm sitting here today. Heaven only knows I've been fighting with them pretty hard for the last 5 months. I think Travis would probably agree. He's been the brunt of much of it. But ultimately, listen, I want to move forward, we want to move forward, and we want to build something special for Oshawa. While we maintain our incredible footprint in Ingersoll, while we continue to fight for our members in Woodstock and St. Catharines. So we've got a lot of work here to do, but the basic fundamental issue doesn't change.
We're going to take a couple more questions in the room before we go to the phones.
Adrian Gobriel from City News. Question for Jerry. Jerry, you say the business model proves to you that there will be more jobs in the future. You're telling, the residents of Oshawa, GM workers, to pretty much take you at your word on that. Do you have a firm number in mind that you see in the next 2 years, 3 years, of where this 300 jobs could go to?
Now, let me try to explain it this way. We're sitting here in May of 2019, and we're both saying, including the president of GM Canada, that we're expecting significant growth. We're going to be in bargaining in September of next year. We're going to actually kick off bargaining probably in June, which is a little more than a year from now. So we're going to continue to talk about this footprint today, next month, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, and we're going to evaluate where we're at in June. And we'll deal with this in negotiations. But look, everybody wants to move on, including General Motors. When General Motors says that they're going to make this plant one of their aftermarket centers, that's an important commitment from General Motors, because I understand what it means. This is a 10-year commitment for every vehicle that they assign into the plant. So, look, there's going to be a lot of discussions that are going to need to be had, but ultimately you have to take people at their word, and we'll see how this unfolds. But Travis isn't here with me today as a charade. He's here with me today to say that they're not going anywhere, and there's a lot more work for the parties to do.
And let me add, we would not have put $170 million of investment into this business plan if we didn't think it had a very bright, sustainable future. We would not have put the test track located at that site if we didn't think that we could take that Oshawa facility and bring it and transform that into the future of automotive. This is the thing that I guess everybody's got to get their head around is we were a vehicle manufacturing facility. We're now so much more than a vehicle manufacturing facility. We're integrated into the future of our business, the future of our development, and into an entire business model for parts manufacture, aftermarket parts and component sets that will sustain us for at least 10 years for every product that we apply there. It's a very sustainable business model, and it's something that I think people, as they learn the details, will be extremely proud of.
Travis, quick
Just we
one
got two more
question.
questions.
When you have this track going in for autonomous vehicles, for electric vehicles, is there, you have a university in Oshawa that's on the cutting edge of creating some of this technology. Is there a realistic future at this plant that perhaps autonomous vehicles could be assembled here? The technology could be coming out of this plant and it could be at the forefront of this technology.
Well, again, the mental transition that everybody has to make is we're not a vehicle assembly centre. We've transitioned the plant into a new business model. It's something different now that will be involved in future vehicle development relative to the test track and aftermarket component assembly part manufacture. And yes, it will be integrated into the future of how we create vehicles, but it's more on the innovation side of things with respect to the test track. That's why we have been investing so deeply into Canada in both our Markham Technical Centre and, by the way, our Oshawa Technical Centre. This really embeds Oshawa as a centre of that development activity for years to come.
One more
Good morning.
question over
It's
here.
James Moore from News Talk 1010. For both of you, please. What do you have to say for all of those workers, and there are combined more than 2,000 of them, for who the announcement today doesn't really make much of a difference? They're out of luck and they will not be able to keep their jobs.
Let me go first. So when you look at the details of what we announced, there's a lot in there. So for a start, we have retirement packages that we believe will be accepted somewhere in the vicinity of 50% plus of our employees and the Unifor members. And it's a very good retirement package, and the details will come out tomorrow. We also have we have new job transfers available into other businesses throughout the Ontario area. And then we have the new business activities that I just announced. Those three alone will take over the majority of the 2,600 people, for the majority. So most people are covered. We've been very conscious to have a plan for all of our people. Our people are something that we've said we will take care of. It is a really good package, and for the majority, we're going to take care of those people in those three areas that I mentioned. However, for the remainder that can't fit into one of those areas, we have a job action centre that is set up at the plant, and that job action centre will be taken care of from a jobs portal point of view. We have over 41 companies who've come forward with over 5,000 jobs available. So from a ratio point of view, there are many more jobs than there are people to fill there. General Motors is committing millions of dollars for the retraining of those workers. Now, if you're a person in our company who has experience, we want them to be part of this new venture that we're talking about, but we probably can't fit everyone at this stage. So we will be transitioning people through 2020, and the Job Action Centre is where we're going to do that. So from where we started, from the perspective of where we were with no allocation, this is a really good starting point for this new business and for us to move forward working jointly together.
Last question, right over.
Let me answer his question. Look, we have not only members that work directly for General Motors, but also work for Intiva, Lear, Robinson Solutions. I can start to walk through the companies that work within the supplier base on site. So this is a problem, and I understand that, and that's why to us maintaining the integrity of the site was so important. Like, we will talk about the transformation of the business, which we are concentrating on, because it's a sound plan that will keep people employed for the short term and the long term. But ultimately, you never know how things unfold. I laid out a few examples about an industry that is rapidly changing. The Canadian dollar today is less than 75 cents. It's much cheaper to build a car today in Canada than in the United States. So General Motors understands that, as we do. If I take a look at Canada's social programs, just our universal health care probably saves GM about $6 an hour. So I understand that we are positioned fairly well. But I can't say to people, just hold on, because I have a solution for you next week, because that would be disingenuous. Because as I sit here today, I don't have any commitment from General Motors besides what we're talking about today.
And so I'm just being straightforward with people. But we'll see how this thing unfolds. But it's about creating as many jobs as we can with a short-term and a long-term vision.
Last question.
Sylvie Lenbe, CHCH News. Mr. Hester, you said employees will have a special relocation opportunity. Does that include moving those jobs down to St. Catharines? Will the St. Catharines plant be affected in any way, whether jobs are added or lost?
Yeah, so we have lots of operations throughout General Motors in Canada, and we're looking at offering relocation opportunities to several of those plants, and that will be in the details of the packages that are available tomorrow when Unifor rolls this out to its members.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. If you gave us your email, you've all been given an electronic media package. You'll have these photos and our joint media release and some more backgrounders from General Motors. If you need anything else, please let me or Jennifer know. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have been listening to a news conference in downtown Toronto. GM Canada and Unifor Canada announcing a new deal for workers in Oshawa, Ontario. Travis Hester was speaking for GM, Jerry Dias speaking for Unifor, the union. Now to the details. The car assembly at the plant will end in 2019. That does not change, but GM says it will make new investments to the plant to the tune of $170 million. That money will be used in part to transform the Oshawa plant from a vehicle assembly plant to other operations, including a stamping line. It will immediately save about 300 jobs and will have an eye to creating new jobs for the plant in Oshawa, Ontario in the future. Also announced today the creation of a test track that will be used for the development of automated vehicles, automation, as well as electric vehicles, and that will, says Jerry Dias, create more jobs in the future. So while it may not seem like many jobs are being saved today, again, only 300 of the 2,600 jobs will be saved. Jerry Dias makes the argument that this is a business plan that will create a long term for Oshawa and perhaps more jobs down the road. And with that, let's bring in Scott Peterson. He was listening to that news conference alongside us here in studio. So a couple of takeaways here, and I want to first begin with your thoughts on what was announced today between GM and Unifor.
Well, I thought the question to Jerry Dias was really interesting. The first one out of the gate saying, do you consider this a success or a failure? And he said outright that he's making the best of a poor situation, which really tells you his back was up against the wall with his closure at the end of the year. So he did fight back for those 300 jobs, the $170 million investment, and that 55-acre track, which is interesting as well, saying they're going to maintain the research for autonomous car testing. And that's interesting because that seems to be a policy from the Ontario government. We've heard a lot about this 5G technology, and autonomous cars need that technology, and they're talking about a corridor between Toronto and Montreal. So GM keeping its toe in the water in that regard, and there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot of companies, about 170 companies in Ontario alone researching autonomous cars. So that's interesting. But Jerry Dias, you could really feel the emotion coming from him, saying it was better to have some sort of deal than a hard exit for GM out of that plan.
And again, only 300 jobs being saved with some 2,600. Although interesting to hear from Travis Hester of GM that he said that GM would not be making this investment if they did not believe that there'd be a business model and more development in future. But you know, I also, before you go, I do want to ask you about the timing of this, because why now? GM seemed to be on this path of shutting down this plant, but then all of a sudden this deal. So why now?
Well, one is optics. GM was taking a real black eye from the union as far as this hard exit. You know, the union was saying this is a hard exit from Canada, saying they're abandoning Canada. They took out a Super Bowl ad, sort of accusing General Motors of not being very patriotic. So $170 million to a cynic could say that you're buying labor peace with that. And just the extraordinary optics of seeing Jerry Dias and Travis Hester on the same podium really speaks volumes as far as GM wanting to at least keep a toe in Oshawa. But a lot of it is interesting as well, as that autonomous car testing, the 55-acre track. And that could pay off in spades for GM as far as that testing goes.
Okay, well, the coverage is beginning right now. Scott, good to have your thoughts on it. Our Scott Peterson watching that news conference. Now, that said, we are going to stay on this story, and we want to welcome people now who are watching us on the CBC News Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter pages. And we also want to welcome to the program right now Charlotte Yates. Now, Charlotte Yates is the director of the Automotive Policy Research Center at the University of Guelph. She's here to help answer your questions on GM, the Oshawa plant, plant and the deal announced today. So if you have a question, post it on the comment sections on the CBC News Facebook and YouTube pages, or you can tweet questions to us at CBC News on Twitter. So Charlotte, thank you for joining us today. You know, I want to start right in here because as that news conference was happening, people started sending in their questions. And I want to begin here with Michelle Miller, who on Facebook asked this question. Is this, the deal announced today, an attempt to try to get Canadians to support and keep purchasing GM products?
I don't think there's a direct connection between that. Certainly, GM was under pressure with Unifor's campaign to publicize GM's actions and to kind of, as I think your former commentary say, give a black eye to GM. But I don't think GM sees this as a direct translation. To be honest with you, the Canadian market for all the vehicle makers is pretty small in the global context. But it is a goodwill gesture on the part of GM. GM's been in Canada for decades, and I think they're very aware that good public opinion, good press is important, and so I think it has that side effect, although they wouldn't invest it strictly for that purpose, I don't believe.
I do want to get your thought on the investment being made here. They are saving 300 jobs. They're switching from a vehicle assembly plant to one that does different things, for example, a stamping line, and also creating that test track in terms of developing automated vehicles. What type of potential does that have for creating more jobs at the Oshawa plant?
So I think the stamping is an area where it's not clear how many more jobs that will. I think that's where most of the 300 saved jobs are going to be. I don't know what capacity there is for expansion of that. They've also said that they may be doing some related sub-assembly. Again, it's not clear how many jobs. The autonomous is a little bit more interesting, but it also is a shift in terms of the types of jobs and the types of qualifications of people who you might be looking to work in those areas. GM has made a big investment in the autonomous car, as have many of the automakers. This is the emergent technology of this and the next century. This is going to transform not just the automobile, but the entire transportation system around the world. So for them to be developing this testing track, certainly it puts Oshawa in a good place in that way. But this is not the same kind of activity, nor will it require the same kind of workforce that an assembly operation would.
We have a question here from someone who goes by the handle Shanu Wildparks on YouTube. And their question is, after the closure in Oshawa, what will the total GM employment number be here in Canada?
Ooh, that one I'm afraid I can't answer because I just don't know how many we have in St. Catharines, we have in the plant in Ingersoll. So I'm afraid that, I mean, it would be several thousand, but certainly losing 2,300 now at GM is a significant loss. What I can say is it also means that the old profile in Canada was most of the jobs were housed with the Detroit 3. You know, the Ford, Chrysler, GM. Now, increasingly, employment is more likely in the automotive industry to take place in Toyota and Honda than it is to be in GM. And so in that sense, it changes GM's place, relatively speaking, within the Canadian landscape.
I'm going to group a couple of them right now because we're running out of time, and I do want to ask this question of you. But Ron Thibodeau on Facebook asks about the Premier and the Prime Minister. Where are they in this panel? Teresa Birch on Facebook is asking about the type of tax breaks that GM has. And William Andrews asking whether or not what has happened with GM will make governments rethink the type of loans they extend out to companies in trouble, as both Ontario and the federal government did back in 2008. But grouping all of that together, Charlotte, how much influence does government policy have anymore in terms of keeping auto jobs in this country? Can governments continue to sweeten the pot, or is that era past?
I think governments still have a very, very important role to play. And it's partly about sweetening the pot in terms of attracting new investment or in terms of sustaining investment. And we've seen that recently at Toyota. So we do see government continuing to have a role in that place. It also continues to have a role in terms of making Canada a place for emergent car production, car technologies, and so on. And that's where the investment in highly qualified personnel, in some of the development of technical skills. The other side of it is automotive investment is not just about money. It's also partly about politics. This is a global industry which every country in the world wants an automotive plant. And so in that sense, governments have an important role to play in terms of making sure that companies see this as an attractive place. And if Canada wants an automotive industry, then there is that role to play. It is incredibly important that the two levels of government work together, and in fact, three levels of government, because you also need the municipal level of government to be part of that. And as we know, municipal governments, certainly in Ontario, have been very active, very strategic in trying to attract investment. But they do need the support of the provincial as well as the federal government. And it can be money, but it could also be regulations. It can be climate. It can be investment in emergent technologies, highly qualified personnel, engineering. There's a suite of things that governments play an important role in attracting that investment.
Charlotte, I want to thank you for the time and sharing your insight with us. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
And that is Charlotte Yates, the director of the University of Guelph's Automotive Policy Research Centre. Now, we want to also thank everyone who sent us their questions through our social media streams of Facebook, YouTube, as well as on Twitter. We want to acknowledge the fact that we are not able to get to all your questions, but do stay with us. We're going to stay on this story throughout the day, and perhaps we'll be able to answer some of your questions as we go through the day. I know many people are asking about the actual wages that the 300 saved workers will be getting at Oshawa once this new deal comes in. We're going to keep asking those questions for you, keep tracking this story, so do stay with us throughout the day right here on CBC News Network. But we have more breaking news for you, this time coming out of Windsor in England. The royal baby, the baby Sussex, now has a name. Get ready for this. It's Archie. Let's bring in Dominic Velitis right now, who has details on this. Dominic, in Windsor. So, Archie.
Yeah, Archie. It's a kind of